Oh, hey, welcome to Shipped. I'm so glad you could join us, and I'm so excited to tell you a lot about what we've been working on here at Octopus Deploy. My name's Colin Bowern. I'm the SVP of Product. I support 110 Octonauts doing wonderful work that I'm happy to share with you today. Now, look, to get started, we are absolutely obsessed with helping you get to happy deployments. For us, it's really critical that we have a product that you can trust and love and know that will work when you go to hit that deploy button, whether it's Sunday at 3 a.m., Tuesday at 4 p.m., or Wednesday at 9 a.m. We want to make sure that you've got deployments that are repeatable, reliable, and traceable. And so we were building all kinds of capabilities to take that to the next level. So know that this is absolutely a quality product piece that we care about. So a lot of what I'm sharing with you today is a result of the hard work that we're doing, working with customers like yourselves to build and support your deployments getting to the next level. As I mentioned, we are 110 Octonauts across Australia and New Zealand. We're getting back out into into the community. It seems like this year we're at the customer conferences. We're at various developer and product management and design events. So we'd love to see you. If you ever see an Octonaut, we've got stickers. We'd love to say hi. We're a very friendly crew that would love to get to know you a whole lot more. So please do come say hi if you see us out in the community, whether it's at KubeCon or DevOps Enterprise Summit or at some of the local meetups. Um, all these features are driven by both that vision and passion to bring you happy deployments, but also from your feedback. We do read every comment that comes in, whether you fed back through a form inside the product, send share some thoughts with customer success or support or sales, or commenting online. We are all reading, and we do read every single thing. So thank you so much for our feedback. It gives us a lot of fuel knowing that people are enjoying the usage, but also we're happy to take as well the less perfect feedback, knowing and giving us signal as to areas that we still need to work on and polish. So please don't be shy. We will take every opportunity to read all of your feedback. It influences a lot of our thinking and product decisions and gives us signal as to where to focus next. Now, look, before we get started, I thought I'd set the scene, tell you a little bit about what's on our mind. What are the things that are kind of keeping us up at night? Because we think they might be keeping you potentially up at night. And then we'll get into a little bit about where we're investing and some of the great features we've shipped and some of the things that we're working on next. Now, it's probably no surprise to you that container apps are becoming a thing. And for where we are on the adoption curve, while Kubernetes has been around probably for 5 to 8 years now, we're kind of at that stage where we're now starting to take it really seriously as an industry. In a lot of ways, it was like kind of back when we were going from physical machines to virtual machines. The real big test I remember at the time was, can the database server run on a virtual machine? That was it. If you've solved for the database server a high IO, a high resource demand compute, then I can trust virtual machines. And containers were hitting that kind of momentum where we're getting over a lot of the trust issues with containers. And there still are a few gnarly barriers yet. When we work with folks like Brendan Burns over at Microsoft, we talk a lot about hostile code inside containers. And so but we think this is a space, though, in 5 years' time, if you're starting a new project, it's almost certainly going to be a container app. And we see a lot of customers today piloting or kind of early adopting, moving their first couple of applications in the enterprise space or in the smaller space. We see whole customers running serverless and containers. So container apps are here to stay. Kubernetes certainly, while it's become the dominant API and interface, will it be around in 5 or 10 years? Probably, but there's still probably innovation kind of in and around the space. But the concept of packaging as containers, it's here. It's not going anywhere. The other concept that's been kind of interesting, probably around longer than containers, is the whole declarative configuration. And we're seeing this happen across developer tools and operations tools as well. Now, this is again not something new. We had this with Ansible way back when, Vagrant and Puppet back in the VM days. Now moving forward to Terraform, Pulumi. and Octopus as well with our config as code. What we think is really interesting about this is not that anybody's really excited to go and write some YAML by hand. Plenty of memes out there about why that's not necessarily the most enjoyable activity, but it's the actual codifying of that schema, that state, that workflow that unlocks a lot of the collaboration and workflow opportunities. So I can diff changes more holistically inside the places that I already live, or run audit and scanning and practices tools over the configuration. So again, another trend that kind of as a DevOps engineer or platform engineer or a developer, just starting to pay attention to is how much of my workflow is moving to the sort of declarative configuration world. And the final big trend, and this is the buzz all over the social channels at the moment, is platform engineering. It seems like only yesterday we were talking about DevOps engineers. Now we're talking about platform engineers, and like any good industry, we'll happily rename things over and over to keep it fresh. But really, at the end of the day, the underlying motivation continues to be there of we want to be able to organize our teams, empower them with really great practices, in part so they can go faster, but also in part so that we don't end up with more variation coming into the IT portfolio. And ultimately for your CIO, CTO, de-risking a bunch of the compliance and regulatory obligations they might have by having too much data spread out in too many different ways that now become painful to manage. So three really important trends. These are things kind of ticking in the back of our mind as we're doing a lot of our work across the features we build, but also the problems that we're looking at next. And we hope these are on your mind as well. So where are we focused? Kind of those 110 octonauts. Some of them are thinking about kind of the what's next and maybe some emerging problems, but a majority of us are really thinking about three big areas of investment. Number one, enterprise Kubernetes. We really think kind of, we're moving beyond proof of concept initial teams adopting, and we're seeing a lot of customers who want to roll out container-based apps, in particular on Kubernetes, across their organization. However, they're finding today they're still spending a lot of time gluing together a bunch of tools, and they might be little point tools that do little bits of the flow, but they're building a lot of scripting glue to hang it all together. And when you step back and look at kind of where they came from, maybe a team that might have been deploying to machines, it's like, well, I kind of had ITSM approvals, I had environments. Why are we reinventing it again? So we're looking at how we can bring a lot of the concepts that have existed in tech in IT for decades now, and really make sure that those kind of learned patterns and experiences of kind of the things that almost stay true regardless of the tech continue on, and ultimately make it really easy for those application teams to kind of get onboarded with the enterprise definition of how you want to use Kubernetes. So lots coming up in this space, lots of work happening in the space. We'll talk about some of the specifics soon. Um, the second big theme, kind of partly teeing off the declarative configuration, but really also a bit of a step change for us at Octopus, is really becoming more and more opinionated about using Git to store assets, or having Git store your workflows, or using those workflows like commits and pull requests and whatnot in the way that you interact. And so you're going to see a lot more across the Octopus experience with source controlled assets, in particular around Git, as well as some enhancements around GitHub itself and how we make that a great experience. Seeing a lot of interest and kind of people starting to kick the tires around GitHub Actions. We love the folks over at GitHub are chatting regularly with their product teams. We're just at GitHub Universe if you saw us there. So we think there's lots more happening in Git and GitHub coming in. We want to make sure those workflows are rock solid. And finally, we're thinking about those org scale portfolios, moving beyond kind of like I've got my tech stack set up for my new apps. Well, what about all those heritage apps? The 95% of the IT portfolio that was built over the last 20, 30 years. How do we bring that all together into that kind of single pane of glass, single set of kind of governance management controls? and also just generally, kind of go back to that Octopus promise of I can hand the deploy button to somebody, and then I can see where my changes are. How do we fulfill that at an organizational level? So again, working down that path, and happy to show you some of the great things that we're working on there today. So let's start with enterprise Kubernetes. Now, if you haven't been paying attention for the last 2, 3 years, we've been starting to ship more and more Kubernetes related functionality. And in the last 12 months, I'm really happy to share with you just, some of the bigger pieces we've been unlocking, and some even bigger pieces coming in the very near future. So first and foremost, Kubernetes tools, a lot of them are command line based. I may have to have multiple terminal windows open just to kind of get a sense of what's happening. But what the real change is I deploy a manifest that touches a bunch of objects inside this single action. And it may be important to really understand kind of, is there a replica set or a pod that is, for whatever reason, not spinning up, not taking on my deployment. And so we've actually gone and seen this pattern where we watch what people do, and see what else they're doing around Octopus and the deployment with our customers today using Octopus with Kubernetes. And we're saying there's actually an opportunity here to bring some of that status of deployment back into the tool, give you the really essential information you need to understand if a deployment fails, where it might have failed, and what's gone wrong. So seeing a lot of adoption amongst our existing customers using Kubernetes of this feature, because it's just giving them more visibility, more power right within the deployment experience. As I mentioned, Git's a big part, but also in particular for Kubernetes, with the whole GitOps style of working, you want to be able to reference a lot more of things stored inside Git. Whereas previously with Octopus, we worked at kind of more from a package-based cycle, and so you'll start to now see opportunities to things like, for example, pull scripts or YAML manifest directly from Git. And this will make it a whole lot easier for you to both kind of reuse files across projects, but also save you a couple of extra steps in getting your deployments configured and rolling out. Customize. Now, lots of, as usual in the Kubernetes ecosystem, there's usually a couple of different ways of doing about the same thing. For us, we're taking a little bit of a bet on customize, and we see this tied together nicely with Octopus variables. And so we've built in a first class step that allows you to transform your configuration manifest using customize, and then connecting that obviously with Octopus variables to get that really multi-layered templating experience. Now, coming up, this is really exciting. There's a lot of things that we kind of figured out over the last kind of 10 plus years of deploying to machines around how to get workloads into places. And into places where it's in my data center, or maybe it's in somebody else's data center, maybe it's in a retail store, a hospital, all these different places. And one of the things that we've learned is that there's a couple of patterns here that have kind of stood the test of time. And the tentacle agent that is running in the place you're trying to deploy to unlocks a bunch of opportunities. So with Kubernetes, we're going to be shipping a Kubernetes tentacle, so that you can deploy and run tasks right within the cluster. And you kind of get all the advantages of Kubernetes scaling. We simplify a lot of the cluster authentication, and maybe, possibly remove the need for something like Argo in the mix. Maybe you don't need that to get your app out the door. But more importantly, we're doing it in a way where we're bringing all of that experience and deploying to bear here, and offering things like the polling mode. So you don't have to expose your Kubernetes API to networks that you may not trust, or may not be able to expose with. So we're getting all that goodness. And of course, it'll be a single step install. We'll make it really, really easy. We'll make it just work, as we have with our tentacle on machines. So really excited to hear how you might adopt this. And again, if you're interested in it, we'll tell you more about how to give us some feedback. The other piece that we're working on, again, kind of going back to that sourcing of YAML files and starting to notice some patterns, in particular as we see real world GitOps practices and what really matters. One of the things that we've identified is that release creation around Octopus, getting that triggered, whether it's a Helm chart update or a container image in a repository that changes, or maybe just in general a Git commit. How do we get that to kind of kick off the process, create more of that pull centric practice? So you'll see us release a couple of triggers to trigger releases. And that should hopefully keep your deployment processes a little bit more simpler. And finally, in the Kubernetes space, we know that I still think we're in kind of day one of Kubernetes in so many ways. There's still a lot of teams out there that are just starting for the first time, or maybe the kind of innovator digital team has figured it out. Now it's time for the rest of the teams to adopt, and so we want to really make it easy for whether you're a new user or you're an experienced Kubernetes user to just get started with Octopus and Kubernetes. So we'll make that process a little bit simpler, learning from our 300 plus customers today doing Kubernetes with us, watching our newest customers now starting to adopt, and we'll incorporate some of that practice into the product experience. So definitely keep upgrading if you're using Kubernetes. There's lots of goodness coming in every single release. Now, in DevOps Enterprise Summit style, just to borrow something from that great conference, I want to share a little bit about where we need some help. So we would love to hear about anybody who's looking at how to monitor Kubernetes resources after that deployment execution happens. What happens next? What's the next 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days look like? Not and kind of give us a sense of what you're looking for, what signals, etc. We'd also love to talk, as I mentioned, kind of with onboarding, anybody who's onboarding application teams who are new to Kubernetes. So not your kind of expert team that's done the pilot and figured it out. It's the every other team that you want to bring into the mix. So if you could share some feedback, octopus.com/roadmap, you'll see a few cards. There's also a submit new idea up in the upper right-hand corner. Give us some feedback about how you're solving some of these problems or how you work on this today. And of course, stay tuned. We've got a whole session here at Shipped on beyond GitOps and how we're applying some of those practices. So we'll share with you some of the things that we're learning and seeing out there. So that was all things Kubernetes. Now, of course, your whole IT portfolio, if you're in a large bank or government or whatnot, you're probably not all Kubernetes, but you're probably adopting much more declarative configuration and kind of Git-centric workflows. So this is something we think actually a lot of teams are already well and truly adopting, and so again, been working to make this a whole lot nicer and easier. So earlier this year, late last year, we shipped version control variables, so kind of extending the config as code to include the variable management. That was a really important thing that we heard from customers in terms of being able to manage that configuration. And we've included things like being able to scope those variables right within the process. So again, kind of an essential piece beyond the original config as code launch. We also shipped branch protection because nobody wants to accidentally commit to the main branch an unplanned change when they meant to commit it to a feature or a test branch. So giving you those controls to rest assured that you're not going to accidentally deploy something to production, or users won't be able to accidentally deploy changes to production when they're changing their configuration. And then if you haven't been following, we've been shipping a whole bunch of GitHub Actions, and this started last year and kind of continued into this year. And it's a comprehensive set of GitHub Actions, everything from pushing packages to triggering deployments and runbooks. And this is allowing for all our customers who are looking at, maybe it's time for a new CI tool and what's that handoff point look like, et cetera. So we really love what's happening over in GitHub Actions and been supporting it for the last 2 years. Most recently, we've improved. So if you kind of looked at our actions in the early days, it's gotten even better. We've flipped the switch from calling the CLI to using the API directly, and we're seeing a much faster workflow start and execution. So if you're using GitHub Actions, exploring GitHub Actions, build with Octopus, deploy with GitHub, or sorry, build with GitHub, deploy with Octopus. Where are my words? We'd love to help you with those complex deployment scenarios on top of GitHub Actions. And of course, security paramount these days. As things go to code, what we don't want to do is ask you to manage a bunch of API keys all over the place. So we'll be rolling out OpenID Connect and really kind of focusing around that kind of initially Azure and GitHub connectivity to make sure that we can securely have that connection without having to manage yet more API keys and credentials around the system. So definitely take a look at that if you're using either of those services. And what's coming up in this space is a GitHub app. because we certainly, while we've seen good adoption and good feedback on our GitHub Actions, there's more we want to do in this space. We've got lots of really great ideas we've been bubbling around with the GitHub Actions team over at GitHub, but it all starts with a GitHub app. So you'll see that first release coming out shortly. It's going to focus on a lot of the config as code project scenarios, but we'll be exploring more in the future there. So do keep an eye for that. We've been starting to use it internally in our deploy instance, and yeah, really loving what we get there. And it's of course spawning lots more ideas. So we're excited to bring this to you very, very soon. So what do we need in modern workflows? What are we listening for? Well, we're listening for, and we've gotten a lot of feedback, and so we're pretty, kind of confident we might do something in this space by getting those run books stored as code in a Git repository. But if this is you, and maybe you haven't heard of this, or maybe you haven't given us the feedback, please pop onto our roadmap and let us know. The other side is the Terraform provider. We've been doing some smaller enhancements around the Terraform provider, but we're seeing a lot more customers use it at scale. And so really want to hear from how you're using the Terraform provider today, maybe what challenges you're hitting and how you'd like to use it. But if you want to hear more about GitHub Actions and more modern workflows, stay tuned for the session coming up. All right, finally, I'd love to talk to you about some of the things we're doing to scale up kind of your usage of Octopus, really kind of get it ready to be that standard tool for the enterprise. So let's dig into it. So you might have noticed we're talking a lot about multi-tenancy lately, and actually it's been an area both of pride and evolution. It's been a feature that's been around for a while. It's used in particular to deploy to the edge or to deploy to multiple clouds or clouds and data centers. But what we're seeing though is actually an explosion of the numbers of tenants that people are using, and so it's causing us to think about kind of not just performance of the app, but the usability and how people interact. And so we've been spending a lot of time over the past 12 months really kind of talking to customers about how they're using tenants. And we've learned some things. It's not all quite retail stores. Some people have some very interesting scenarios. But what's come out of this is actually we've got some opportunities to improve the user experience. And it's something you've been telling us in the feedback. There are certainly some areas of the user experience that at scale start to get a little bit harder. So the redesigned tenants dashboard, if you haven't seen it, if you're a big multi-tenant user, I really encourage you to get the release and take a look at this. Not only have we made it rocket fast, we've been doing some fantastic performance engineering work behind the scenes. We've really looked at kind of how people use it, what information is necessary there, and how do you get views that make sense to you. So definitely take a look at that if you're using tenants. It'll also kind of give you a bit of a hint of some of the design patterns we're looking to bring to the rest of the application. The other thing that we're also recognizing is that when you have lots of tenants and perhaps you've adopted more microservices, so you got lots of projects. The last thing you want to do is kind of next, 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 finish, next, 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 finish. So we started to incorporate some bulk actions to really reduce the effort it requires to get things connected and configured. And so this is an example of the experience. Kind of again one of the patterns that we're testing out, where connecting projects and tenants is now a whole lot simpler. Instead of, I think it was 5,000 steps to connect thousands of tenants and projects, it's now 5 easy steps. So we hope you appreciate this from saving you time. Also, kind of the performance experience of it just all happening under the covers, lightning fast. And a long time feature request. This one's been really kind of bubbling around for a while, so I'm really excited that we shipped this. But especially if you got multiple teams deploying all the time, occasionally you have this emergency that needs to get out the door now. And it might be a case of a configuration change, a piece of code, a runbook task that needs to run. And you can't, the thing you want it to do is just be the next thing that's run. So we've now introduced an ability to reprioritize the task queue, moving that critical task up to be run next. So really looking forward to the feedback on this one. This one's been a piece of feedback that people have been looking for a while, and more importantly, we're seeing as in particular, it's becoming a real pain point as people do, thousands of deployments in a time period. Another one of those kind of quality of life things, and again, as you scale, is occasionally a task or a step gets stuck. and it might just need another go. And it could be a table lock in a SQL database updating. It could be kind of a file in use. And so we've created this pair of step timeouts and retries. I'm really excited by how the team has done this. They've tried not to make it overly complicated. And they've made it up as kind of two individual features that you can use separate, but you can also pair up. And what we're seeing as our customers have been adopting this is actually it's really reduced a lot of those kind of hung and failed deployments, as well as the manual intervention sometimes to give things a nudge by saying, hey, you know what, this step along the way, why don't you retry it 3 times before you officially call it failed? And guess what? It's time 2 or time 3, it works. So again, another one of those real quality of life things that kind of give you time back in the day to focus on doing other things that move your application forward. And along the same lines, networks also can be equally finicky, especially if you're deploying halfway around the world, or you're deploying out into kind of rural parts where maybe connectivity sometimes is a little bit up and down. Here in New Zealand, you might be deploying to the middle of the South Island, where fixed wireless is your only way to get there, and occasionally a sheep walks in front of the transmitter. And so now you need to be able to just immediately kind of pick up where you left off. And so Tentacle now is a lot more resilient towards those network errors, and will reconnect and rerun and get you away from those deployments that may otherwise have failed. So really exciting if you're deploying to networks you don't control, or networks that maybe are a little bit shaky from a reliability perspective. A really, really great kind of improvement for you. And then, as I mentioned, new users coming into Octopus with Kubernetes. It's not just about Kubernetes, it's about new users in general. There's a lot of things inside Octopus, and we want to make it really easy, not just that blank slate of file new project, and then um, you've got to figure out where to go, but actually to guide you through the project setup. So if you've installed a more recent version, or you're on our cloud instance, you'll notice the new project experience is a lot richer now. But one of the really neat things here is both the sample step and the sample project. These are fully working kind of examples that you can insert to get that hands-on learning of key concepts. Because as us kind of developers out there, we like to get hands-on. Get that Bash script or that PowerShell script stood up, run a few things, make sure the connectivity actually works as I expected, etc. So we see this as a real enabler for those folks that are just kind of getting started with Octopus. So really excited to bring this to you. Really easy to add and get engaged with. But there's more. We know we've got some steps as we were doing that work on improving the guide and the setup. We see some opportunities to actually make it even less effort to get things set up. You might need to add credentials, accounts, feeds, certificates, all those sorts of things. Today, some of those experiences will navigate you away from the project context. So we're working on things to keep you inside the context, give you a sidebar with more useful information, more contextually relevant information if you're new. So keep an eye on this space. It's going to get a whole lot easier and a whole lot faster to spin up new projects on Octopus soon. So where would we love to hear from you on? I'd love to hear if you've got in particular challenges using the project tenant variables dashboard. Again, from a UX perspective, we'd love to see the real world and the gnarly combinations out there. So if you're using that, we'd love to hear from you. We'd also love to hear if you've got deployments or runbooks that need to survive maintenance operations, restarting a Tentacle, restarting Octopus server. We'd love to hear about those scenarios. We'd also love to know if you're really looking to increase the throughput of your deployments. We've got some ideas, and we've got some big architectural changes underway that you'll start to see in the product blog over the next couple of months, where we talk about some of the things that we're doing to improve that there. And finally, if your organization uses deployment freezes, something that might be relevant this time of year as people go away for holidays, we'd love to hear from you. So please reach out on the roadmap, send us your feedback, and of course, stay tuned to some great sessions for some more in-depth stories of these problem sets. So it's not just great product we want to bring you. We're constantly researching, working with customers, listening to the state of the ecosystem. One of the things that really is kind of my pride of Octopus is it's a product solving real world problems. And so we want to share some of the things that we're learning with you. So here are just 3 of many resources that we shipped recently or will be shipping soon. You can get an early access preview. of things that we're working on that are sharing a bit of that picture that we're seeing as we're talking to customers. And these are just real world things. We're not trying to sell you anything. We're trying to just give you that insight to help you make better decisions in your teams. And we'd love your feedback on them as well. So please check them out and let us know what you think. You can hear some stories of what we're learning, what we're seeing out in the real world in a few of the sessions coming ahead here on Ship. So that about wraps it up. We shipped a bunch of really big things. It's not all. There's lots of little things. There's lots of little performance changes. One of our engineering teams showed me there's a showcase from one of our engineering teams engineers that showed me where they took a view that was taking minutes down to milliseconds. So there's lots of little things happening. So if you haven't checked out the latest of what's new in Octopus, kind of at a broad level or in the change log, if you're, I definitely encourage you to take a look at getting to the latest. If upgrading's a pain, we've got Octopus Cloud. We're running some really big gnarly customers on Octopus Cloud, so we can always offload that keeping current pain and bring it into our cloud as well. So give us a call if that's a better option for you. And then, of course, the what's next. So here's the slide that you can share with all the other Octopus users in your company about really interesting things coming up. But also encourage you to take a look at our roadmap and let us know what else we're missing. What are we not working on that's really important to you? Again, we read all your feedback. We absolutely love it. So that's it. I'm Colin Bowern. On behalf of all of the Octonauts and R&D in Australia, New Zealand, and all Octonauts worldwide, looking to bring you happy deployments, which result in happy software teams, which allow you to do amazing things. Thank you for joining us today here at Shipped, and look forward to seeing you out in the field and meeting you over the next year.